Hi, this is Dr. Tom Moorcroft. Welcome to Full Cup Life, the podcast that goes behind the science of living well to exposing the truths and tactics to savor all that your journey to greater success has to offer to you every sip of the way.
Hey everyone, Dr. Tom Moorcroft here. I'm so excited to welcome you to this episode of Full Cup Life. Today, I'm joined by my friend, Robert Richman. And, it's really interesting. This is one of my favorite interviews. Robbie is somebody that you might know of as a culture hacker who was the culture strategist at Zappos, where he co-created Zappos Insights, which was his innovative program focused on educating companies on the secrets kind of behind that amazing Zappos employee culture. Or maybe you've read his book, The Culture Blueprint. And really, the reason that I wanted to chat with Robbie is he's got so many insights on culture and culture within businesses. But so much of having an amazing culture in business is those strategies can also be applied to, a smaller company, to our family unit, to relationships, and even our relationship with ourselves. And so I really wanted to have a deep conversation about the things that really Robbie's learned and taught over the years, and how we can apply them in different aspects of our lives. The coolest part, though, is we got to talk a lot about the Xpill, which you have to definitely stick around for that part of the conversation. Xpill is something that Robbie came up with, and it's essentially how to do your own open label placebo. So if you want to learn how to change your mind and get results with minimal effort and really just have a big mindset shift and focus on the goals you want, definitely want to check that out. So anyway, we had a great conversation. We dove a lot into chronic illness and mindset shifts in that. We just talked a lot about all the areas of our lives where we can apply this. So I hope you'll join us for this one. It's totally amazing, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Well, hey, Robbie, thanks so much for joining me today. This is going to be awesome.
My pleasure. Always great to talk to you.
Yeah, everybody, this is so great to have Robbie on here. I think my first experience really with you, I can't remember if it was Xpill or Open Space, but both were just like these kind of life-changing experiences. And, the thing I really just want to talk about is like, how can we live our best life? And what are the things that you've learned from your background, your, personal journey and what you do in your business that can allow us to have a better culture, both in our families as well as in our workplaces. So I'm sure this can go a whole bunch of places
to go with it. Yeah. I think I'll just first comment on something you said about the reason you started with this podcast and about passion and people living their passion and yours. And what hit me is the root of the word passion, which I believe means to suffer for. You've got so much passion, you're willing to suffer for it. And to me, that's a key distinction, because I remember one of my first passion projects was starting a magazine in college. And that involved a lot of time and effort and money and all that. But I loved it. So something that you're willing to suffer for, right? And like when I wrote my book, The Culture Blueprint, man, that was not all fun. There were some really, really tough moments, but it's worth suffering for. And I think that's the difference, because oftentimes people think, okay, what's going to make me happy? How will I feel fulfilled, et cetera? But passion's really interesting because it gets down even deeper to say, okay, what do you want so much that you're willing to suffer for it to the other side?
So interesting, because, as you were saying that, I was just thinking, of a Wallace Wattles quote where by thought, what you want is attracted to you, but through action, you receive it. Right. And it's like, I just, what I hear and what you're saying is that, like, some of these things we actually have to take action. It's not just like, let's change our mind or start watching movies about it, but we actually have to do some work to make these changes happen.
Yeah. And the question is, do you want to? And that's why I have a test, because I get so many new ideas, and I have a test that I run it through to make sure it's a good idea. And it just has to pass these two questions. The first is, if I know it will fail, not maybe fails. If I know it will fail, would I still do it? And the best things I've done past that test, like my book, The Culture Blueprint, if before writing it, you told me this is going to fail, it's not going to work or sell, I'd be like, I still want to do it. Right. Or when I took the opportunity at Zappos, if you told me, Robbie, you're going to fail at this, I would still do it. right? So if you pass that test, it means you want to do it for the experience, which means it'll carry you through, successful or not. And if it passes that test, I ask the second question: if this is going to be 5 times the amount of work that I think it is still worth it? And if it passes that, then it means also too, I'm enjoying the process and I'm enjoying the work. And I can't tell you how many times I've had this great idea and then it does not pass those tests. And it's hard to let go because I'm like, but it's such a good idea. And I'm like, but no, I'm in it for the wrong reasons, because if it's not successful, I'm going to think this was a total waste of time. And that means it wasn't the right reason.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it brings a smile to my face, because there's so many times where I've put all this effort into something and it might not have turned out the way I thought, but I was like, but I still think it was really worthwhile. And I was quickly evaluating some of the bigger projects I've worked on that have turned out okay, but they didn't like blow up the way I initially had hoped. And you're like, but I love that whole process.
Totally.
Yeah. And so, it's interesting because in your book, The Culture Blueprint, you talk about like, one of the questions that came up towards the end of the book that really got me was like, do you care? Or do you actually want to be doing like, if you're the boss, do you really care about the people you're working with? I mean, what's so important about actually caring about it? I mean, because so many people in business think it's about money.
Yeah, it's so interesting how that came up too. I was at Zappos and I was leading one of the sessions there for people coming in learning about the Zappos culture. And the guy was asking all these questions about how to handle his people. And I could read him on an emotional level, that it's what people say with their words, but on an emotional level, there was a lot of like anger, frustration that he should be doing these things, but didn't want to be doing those things. And I said, look, let's just cut straight to the truth. And I said, do you give a shit about your people? I wanted to be, pardon the French, but I really wanted to be that direct. And he just took a moment and said, I don't know. And I said, thank you for your honesty. Like, and to really think, do you really care about your people? Because there's all kinds of jobs you can do without having a team and managing people and that kind of thing. But if you do have people, they're not machines. And you've got to think, do I really care about these people? And that's why I think when you're choosing a business to go into, there's A, who are you serving and do you like those people? And B, who are you working with and do you like those people? Because if you don't, it's just going to be a world of frustration. And that's why I say that with the book of like, look, if you like your clients, if you like your people, want to work with them, all this stuff is going to work great in the Culture Blueprint. If you don't, no judgment. Let's just be honest. Let's be honest if you really don't like your customers, or if you really don't like your people, or if you don't even like working with people, that's okay. But culture is people. So yeah, that was the whole point of sharing it.
Oh, it's so great though, because like, I mean, I think about it's like, as I mentioned, like families have a culture, right? And it's like, you see parents who are checked out. And as a physician, I work with parents who are, they're more invested in their work than they are their family culture, and vice versa too. And one of the things, a lot of the people who I work with are either chronically sick or they're physicians who are training them. And I think that the concept of loving what you do and loving who you do it with is really important, because I'll often ask, and maybe, from a patient perspective, it's just like, what do you really love? What do you really want out of your life? Because I'm trying to figure out how to get them involved in their healing. Because everybody says they want to get better until you ask them to do the work. So, I mean, like, how do you evaluate that though? Because I mean, I know that there's, we can learn things from your experience that will help us better as patients, better as clinicians to enjoy our lives. But I mean, like, how do you start to ferret it through? Maybe there's something that is important at work, but there's some, I don't know, trepidation. There's something holding you back. I mean, do you have ways to evaluate, taking a job, not taking a job, or working on something? Like you said, you had those 2 little tools for yourself, but in sort of the bigger culture, because I feel like people's morale sucks, right? I mean, they're sick. They just want me to give them a pill. Well, there's not a pill. So that's maybe the real question.
Well, we can talk about the pill for that, the Xpill, and how that helps.
We totally got to talk about that because that's the best. That is so much fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one question I like to, there's several different layers of this. One question I like to ask people, it's a trigger word, but it helps, is I say, who are you jealous of? Like, who do you look at and be like, man, I wish I could be like them, right? Because it doesn't, I know jealous is an ugly word, but it shows clues because we recognize something in somebody else that that we might want. And then the question is like a friend of mine, Clay Bear, says, don't look at somebody's what they have, but look at their calendar. If you really want to be president, look at the president's calendar. You probably don't want to be president, right? Like there's something else about that. But if you see what they do on a time-to-time basis, but that tends to be a clue. The other that I found, like when I was really, really depressed, I had lost, I think, 80 grand in a business. I was in the hole. I was depressed, didn't know what to do. All I knew for certain was that I liked spinning, the exercise Peloton bikes. And I said, I'm going to become a spinning instructor where there's no money there. There's just nothing there. But it was the only thing I was clear about. My friends thought I was crazy. My parents thought I was crazy. You're like, you don't have a job. But I said, this is all I'm clear about. And it gives me energy. And the thing of going through that process was I got so much good energy out of that I got into a new mindset and I could see new opportunities. And everybody thinks you need that job to get the new mindset and the opportunities. What if you just went straight to the energy and the mindset? And that's why I think that, when things are unclear, go to where they are clear, even if they don't make sense, because that made no sense, no money sense for sure, right? But it was the only thing I was clear about that I wanted to do. And I've heard stories like this from other people. Another entrepreneur who said the only thing he knew he wanted to do was be a little league coach. And through that, he developed this software platform to organize teams and ended up selling this software platform, made a ton of money and moved on. But the only thing that was clear to him at that point was he wanted to be a little league instructor. Right. Yeah. So that's why I'd say, when people come to me when they're indecisive, I even get even further granular. I said, look, all I want you to do is pick something that you really, really want for lunch today. It doesn't matter what it is. Just pick that and just go after that with full abandon, like reckless abandon, just like, and enjoy that moment and have that clarity, because it's all about clarity and it can start as something small. It reminds me of when we were doing coaching at Zappos. This one woman really wanted to get in shape and she was out of shape, and eventually looked like a battle axe. But her first task that the coach gave her was literally just to go to the gym, use the bathroom, and leave. That's it. That was her first gym experience, was going into the bathroom, leaving, just to start small. Because we oftentimes think, oh, if I don't do a whole hour-long workout, I'm not going to get it, right? So when people aren't clear what they want, I just tell them like what's the smallest possible unit of what you want, even if that's what's for lunch. Because if you build that certainty engine, that conviction engine, it keeps going.
And I think you get momentum too. It's like, I mean, I'd work with a lot of, I'm even just thinking about myself right now. It's like, I have all these big visions, but some of the biggest part of the vision is not very clear. But it's like, I love what you said, getting the clarity, because then it gives you the energy to actually do. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't have any energy, I'm so stressed out. I'm like, well, because you're focusing on stuff you don't love, and you're fighting the fact that you're focusing on things you don't love. And I think
totally. And I want to address also what you said about a job. I train people sometimes on how to get jobs. And one of the most interesting things for me to realize with people is they'll come to me. They'll say, hey, Rob, I just don't know if I want this job. It involves this, it involves this, involves this. And I'll say, well, did they give you a job offer? And they say no. And I said, well, then that's a great problem you don't have.
Right.
If you're on the fence, go for it. Especially if you go for it and get a job that you're not even sure of, you've got leverage now. You're like, I'm not even sure. You offered me it, but I'm not sure I want it. Now you can even sweeten the deal, right? So to me, there's no point in making a decision on a job if you haven't gotten an offer. So if you're thinking, I might want to do this, I might not, go for it. Interview it. Apply for it. It's a fantastic problem if they're offering you a job that you don't know if you want. Right. So that's why the next step is usually just the clarity. If you have clarity that you're not sure, go for it And then you'll have a great problem to have.
That's awesome. You know, when you said jealousy, it's funny too, because I heard this great definition of jealousy, which is the fear of losing something that you don't currently have. And I was like, Robbie just nailed it, man.
My gosh.
Right?
I'm writing that down. That is
amazing.
For
sure. I mean, I think the first person I heard say it was Bob Proctor in one of our in one of the groups I do with him. But I'm, you know, the thing is, it's just like, we're so worried about stuff when, you know, like you said, it's just go for it. And then if you happen to have to make the decision later on, that's amazing. But right now that decision's not even in front of you. The only decision is action.
Totally.
Oh,
and
man,
it's this, you know, I've realized too, there's this sort of ambivalence that happens. And if you imagine it, like, imagine if anybody listening to this is two planks that are leaned up against each other like a triangle to the ground, and they hold each other up. But they're also inherently very unstable. If you kick it, it'll break, right? And that's what conflicting thoughts are in our mind, is that we have this, I want this, but I want that. And oddly enough, they hold each other up so that you don't have to decide and don't have to move. And it's comfortable, but not stable. Right. And that's what these competing thoughts are in our mind. They oddly keep us in a state of equilibrium by having competing thoughts. That's
sweet. It's so true too, because then we get paralyzed. And one of the things I hear about and love to hear what you think about is I think you're kind of getting to it, is like your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. You know, are there strategies to not get stuck in your comfort zone? Like, particularly at work, like business and stuff. I know that like my medical practice, I mean, we could cruise along and do just more of the same and do more of the same, right? But there's a comfortable safeness to that. There's that apparent stability. But what about if you want to move past that? I mean, are there ways to kind of start getting yourself to actually make those changes without pooing your pants, you know, without freaking out?
Right. Well, I think in some ways that devalues the freak out, right? Because the only way to know an edge is to really go over it, unfortunately. And I've gone over it a few times, right? And it's by going over it, I mean, on so many levels I've done that. But by going over it, you know where it is, right? Because the thing people don't talk about going outside your comfort zone is that everybody says it like it's an amazing thing. Like, yeah, get outside your comfort zone. Great. You can go too far. You know, like you can make some serious mistakes. You can lose a lot of money. You can hurt yourself and others. Right. So to me, going outside your comfort zone is more about where is that sweet spot between I'm no longer comfortable, but I'm also not in overwhelm. Like the zone of overwhelm is where you know you're past your skis, right? Like we were talking about Bitcoin investing, right? Like even if you fully believe in it, if you've leveraged all your credit cards and you can't sleep at night, you're in the zone of overwhelm. You're no longer in the zone of just the discomfort. So the question then becomes, okay, how do I, and it can be tempting. I mean, I think there's a lot of us who've said like, put it all on black, who've bet it all on a business, who've lost it, right? And that's going too far into it. And sometimes the getting out of our comfort zone is actually just being in the middle of that. You know, like how can you not go all in crazy, but how do you not just stay behind? So I think that, you know, Tony Robbins said it well, that if you have to have at least 3 choices for it to be a real choice. 2 is just binary thinking. It's like, do I leave my job or do I not? Do I leave my job? Right? That's binary thinking. Yeah. But if you can think of it beyond binary thinking, oftentimes it's something where you have a dream to do something. Okay, just do that thing for 15 minutes. Right? Like I remember, it's embarrassing. I was in college, I was a film major, and I told everybody I'm going to be a double major in computer science. Right? And I'm like, I'm going to be computer science. I couldn't get past day 1 in intro to C++ programming. I didn't understand what the heck was going on. But that was a 15-minute, essentially hour-long experiment that showed to me where I was at. Right? And thankfully I didn't like go get into MIT on a computer science degree or something.
Find out you don't like
God,
it.
what did I do with my life? Right? No, my risk factor was one class that thankfully I could drop out of. So I think that in a way it's about how can you test it, right? You want to write a book, write a blog post. How can you reduce that scope so that it's just outside your comfort zone as opposed to a huge leap of faith? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it almost sounds like it's like the difference between just kind of like, like you said, just being over the edge and pushing yourself and challenging yourself and having an invigorating experience and complete recklessness. And it's interesting when you mentioned skiing, it's like a lot of folks who listen know that I do a lot of skiing and my family loves it. The thing I've always been most impressed about with like my daughter is that she's completely in control at all times. And every once in a while, and she's been skiing like 3 years and she's like 11 now. And she like is like a total big mountain shredder and on a competition team. But what's different between her and a lot of the boys and even the other girls is she can push that and she'll do exactly what you just said, just barely go over the edge. And then you see her light up that she can do it. But I've seen other people do it and they end up out for the season with an ACL or a broken leg, and it's just kind of I think a concrete experience of that, for me. And one of my skiing friends, he's podiumed in the Red Bull World Tour and all this stuff, but he's a telemark skier. And so it just adds an extra level of complexity. And I asked him, how do you ski so well? And on these moguls, he's like, because I'm always right on that edge and I'll go over it just a little, but 95% of the time I know I can pull it back without yard sailing and crashing. So I think what you're saying is super wisdom is like, just let it flow and go to that area that draws you into it, like with that passion or that love, but not recklessly.
Yeah. It's interesting. You ever watch the show Billions?
No.
Great show. So fun.
Billions.
It's about the financial world. Once you realize it's not, I first didn't like it because I said it's not realistic. And then I'm like, wait a minute, that's the whole point. If this was realistic, it would be a show all about paperwork. Like, it's a great show because it's not realistic. And there's a scene where a character is not sure what to do. And the coach in the situation says, when you're in the fog, go to where the boundary is clear. And I thought it was great because I was talking to a friend about that who wasn't sure what to do in a relationship with an ex, et cetera. And I said that same quote, go to where the boundary is clear. And he realized he had a clear boundary with her, but just wasn't honoring it and was going all into the foggy zone. And then it was just this empowering thought that he said, this is my boundary for the relationship. I'm going to stay there because the boundary is clear there. And so that's been like a helpful mind frame of when you're in the fog, like go to where you know it's clear.
It's so great because I was just mentoring a group of physicians, and one of the things we were talking about is a lot of our patients have access to a lot more information than they used to have, which is really good on one hand and really confusing because there's a lot of differing opinions. And I think that that's what I was trying to teach. And I'll bring that back to them because it's like where, the boundary is clear, teach people about your expertise and give them the opportunity to to learn about what you're dealing with, the infections or whatever, before they even ask the question, like creating like an experience for them. Because I'm a lot about patient experience, because otherwise you're just going through any other doctor's office and then you're in the fog. So I really want to guide that.
Totally.
One of and I'm sure we'd talk about that forever, but one of the things I think is so important about that I hear out of your work is like this idea of, and I think it's a scary idea, to be honest with you, at least for me, it's a little bit scary. And I think a lot of people's is this co-creation. Whether it's co-creating with your spouse or co-creating in your office, because like I run a practice, if I go co-create, I feel like it might get a little out of control, or maybe the people on the receiving end of this is like, hey, let's do this together, are going to be like, I work for you, just tell me what to do. So what is the value of co-creation and how do you start to kind of maybe implement it
Right.
in your
Well,
life?
co-creation I would define as distinctly different from authority. I'm not saying it's not meaning that we're all the authority. It means we're creating it together. The same way a film crew is creating, they're co-creating. But Spielberg, the director, is in charge. There is no question there, right? But he can't do it without co-creating. He can't do it alone. And so I think that the point of co-creating, especially in the culture standpoint, that leaders miss out on is you've got, once you as a leader decide or even have an opinion, most people shut up and they just don't say anything and they say, okay, this is what's going to happen. But the opportunity to co-create as a leader is to listen to everybody first. Like, so for example, at Zappos, even in the training program, what we would do is ask people, what are your expectations of us? Because most orientation programs will say, this is the company and this is our values and this is what you have to do and this is that. That's not the first conversation. The first conversation is, so you're coming into a new company. What do you expect? Tell us what you want, what you expect, all that. And it starts with them talking. And I noticed this about Tony Hsieh and other great leaders is that they talk last. They would hear, they would learn, they would get input, they would understand. And only after all that would they make a decision. And then after that, they would co-create by figuring out how to delegate. Okay, John, how about you do this? You good for this? You do that, etc. So I think people mistake in co-creation for co-authority. People really want a good authority. They do want you as the leader to decide because we're like pack animals. You know, we want the leader to be clear.
Not everybody wants to be alpha for sure.
No, we want somebody else to be the alpha, but we also want to be heard. And the thing is if I'm heard and you make a different decision, I'm still on board because I'm like, you know what? Tom heard me. He really understood what I'm saying. He made a different decision, but I can get on board with this. Versus if Tom makes that decision and I didn't even get my viewpoint heard, I'm already going to be opposed because I'm like, if only Tom heard my viewpoint, he would have decided differently. But now I can't say that. Tom heard me. He really understood. He took in what I had to say. He said, we're not going to do it for this and this reason. Okay, I'm on board. And that's what I mean by co-creation is everybody's involved, but the leader is still the authority.
That's awesome. I'm thinking business as you're talking, but I'm also just thinking the way I try to parent because it's like ultimately I want to create a framework for my daughter to be safe and be able to function in the world. But I'd rather her become Talia and find out who Talia is rather than even becoming my daughter. But I have to she does look to it's very clear. And I think, and even in our practices, I think that that's really, really important because a lot of folks with chronic infections and stuff do deal with really a sort of a patient population that has a lot of needs. And I do a little bit of this, what are your expectations from us of my patients, but not that clearly. And I think I'm going to start that on, tomorrow. Actually, right now, I'll do it as soon as we're done, change our paperwork because we get to it, but we're not taking that. It's interesting the way you do it. I mean, I feel like as I'm looking at that, because I wrote it down, I feel like I'm almost like there's this giving away a little bit of control. Mm-hmm. I mean, does that come up for a lot of people, a lot of businesses you work with, or?
Yeah, the control factor, I think people misunderstand it because, you've experienced open space, a crowdsourced format where everybody can talk. And imagine you're running a big company and you have control, but you're scared of what they're going to say. Imagine they all start complaining that Tom's a terrible leader, right? And you're like, no, I don't want that to happen, right? But the thing is, if they think that, they're already saying that behind your back. They're saying it at the water cooler. They're saying it at home. By you authorizing it, it's like a baller move. You're like, I'm ready to hear anything, right? And that's actually, there's oddly more power in authorizing that co-created space and conversation. But a lot of leaders, they don't want to hear it, but they also don't want other people to hear it. They think, wait a minute, if somebody doesn't like what we're doing here, I don't want all these other people to hear it. And so it's actually it's false control. You're trying to control the narrative. You're trying to control it versus it's kind of the metaphor of, if you have your chest out, it's a very vulnerable position animalistically, right? This is my heart. And you could stab a knife through it, right? It's vulnerable, but it's also the strongest position. Like you having your chest out, shoulders back, your body is in its strongest position, right? Now, if I were to cover up my chest, I'm less vulnerable, but I'm also weak. right? So that's why the leadership of doing these kind of techniques is to be both vulnerable and strong. I'm going to open it up. Any kind of criticism can come in, but I'm also in my strongest position to take action, to learn, to do all those things. So I've seen the best companies are the ones that are like, yeah, let's do it. Usually because they've hired people they know and trust. If you've hired people you don't know and trust and like, I can see why you wouldn't want to do this, because you've got people you don't trust, which is showing the deeper problem.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I just think about the way we do things, and I'm just like, hey, the door's always open. Let's have meetings. And how do you feel? Is there a way? Sometimes I find as you change your culture or you try to develop a positive culture, however you want to phrase it, there's people aren't used to it. They're maybe not as open. They may not start talking about airing the dirty laundry in front of everybody. Are there strategies for implementing it so that if you have an established team that people that we all know, like, and trust each other, but we really want to amp it to that next level so we can have a superior experience ourselves and drive superior customer service? I mean, how do you start doing that?
Yeah, there's two levels to it. On a one-on-one level, it's a really simple question, which is you ask for some feedback, but then one-on-one, eye to eye, you say, would you please tell me what you think I don't want to hear? Would you please tell me what you think I don't want to hear? And what that does is create safety. It's like, oh, Tom, wait, you really want to hear this? Like, yeah. And actually, you're going to fail me if you don't tell me, right? So now you've created safety to go there. That's it on a one-on-one level. Right. On a team level, what I like to do, it's in my book also, the Culture Blueprint. It's called the Obstacle Breakthrough. It's where you go through a series of exercises as a team that starts with the negative, because most leaders make the mistake of going straight to positive, of let's getting everybody together and saying,
oh, the
okay,
compliment sandwich.
Yeah. How, right. But they just say, like, if we got our team together and we say, okay, how can we improve things? What can we do better? Right. It's starting too positive. Instead, what I start with the team is I say, let's say everything that's not working, write it on a board so that it's out of their head. And what I'll usually say is I'll be like, this is all you got. You got to have more negative than this. And I use the metaphor of you're holding out a trash can for somebody to throw up when they're drunk. You're like, get it out, get the poison out. Come on. What, that it? Is that it? Because once we're done, we're done. And they're thinking, and they're like, oh, I hate this, all those things. Let it out, right? Again, a powerful position to be vulnerable and strong because you're authorizing it. And then after that, we go through everything that is working, because now they're no longer thinking about what's not. They can't. They got it all out of their head. What is working? Well, we've got great this. We've got great customer service. We've got a great this. And then they start getting gradually more positive. And then if it's a small enough team, 10 or less, this is what I really love. It's my favorite part, is we have one person be in the middle for like 2 minutes, and we have Tom in the middle, and we say, okay, everybody, what do we love and appreciate about Tom? Tom's such a great guy. He's a nice guy. He always does this. He always does. It's like 2 minutes, and the person will start crying sometimes, because when's the last time a whole group of people just said everything they loved about them? Like, name the last time that happened to you in the last 5 years, right? It never happens, right? So what we've done so far is we've cleared the negative. We've shown how much we've got a group positive. Now we've empowered each individual person as to why they're there. And now there's so much positive energy on a group level, on an individual level, that now what happens is you say that big question, okay, everybody, what can we do? What can we improve? How can we be better? Like, what's that next thing to do? And you've built up so much energy, and you've cleared all the resistance out, that by the end of that exercise, people are just like, oh, practically high-fiving because you're a team again.
That's badass. I love it. Yeah, I'm thinking back. I'm like, I think I did that once as an activity, and there's no other time in my life where I've just stood there and just like had people just, reflect back to me. One of the things I've heard a lot of, and I think it's true, is like a lot of times we look to other people and we like think that they're like so much better. They're doing so much better. We over amplify their positives, and we over amplify our own sort of negative feelings about ourselves. So we downplay how good we are, and we overplay how good they are.
Right. Yeah. And I guarantee anybody who's doing that, myself included, like anybody who's doing that is also looking at somebody else and thinking about how much better they are than that person.
Oh,
right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it goes both ways. The problem is comparison itself, right? I remember when Sean Stevenson rest in peace, who was, he had like 200 different broken bones and was like in a wheelchair, like tiny. And he was on stage, he's talking about how happy he is. And he goes, I'm happy because of all these things I focus on. And he goes, how happy do you think I would be if I was comparing my life to yours? And everybody's like, probably not happy. He's like, you're right. If I was comparing my life to yours, I would not be happy. But that's why I don't do it. Right? Like he's not doing it as a reference to other people. When he focuses completely on his own life, he's happy. And so that's why the game is, it's a judgment game of, oh, that person's so much better than me, I'm so much worse. But then you're doing it somewhere else. You're looking at somebody else thinking how much better you are than them. And it's the comparison game that gets us into trouble.
Oh man, it's just like, yes, yes, yes. I mean, like I see it, well, obviously I see it in myself, but maybe not obviously, but I'm fine with sharing that, but so many patients are like, oh, I'm worse than somebody else, or I'm better than somebody else. And the comparison is for sure the thing that just drives people into that deep, dark abyss,
Yeah. And it's also based on a lot of assumptions, right?
Oh
like,
my
I think
God.
we'd be amazed if we got into somebody's head and thought like, wow, I actually would not want to be this person. And who said this clearly the most was Elon Musk. He said most people would not want to be me. And I think what he's saying is like, there's an internal experience going on that is really not great. Like he goes through a lot of crazy stuff. And if you just see somebody in an interview or something like that, like they're at their best, but if like he was essentially saying it's torture to be me. It's torture to have all these thoughts and be this driven and working on 10 companies. And he's like, I don't think you'd want to be me. But we don't see that. We see the glory, we see the money, we see the influence, we see all those things, and we don't see the internal experience somebody's going through.
Yeah. I mean, it all, the grass is always greener. And I mean, I think that like, it is. It's just like, it was funny. We watched him on SNL, because my daughter found out that, you can record SNL and watch it when she's awake. And I mean, he was great, but it's just like, I was watching him saying that I'm like, I could not imagine. I mean, I feel like I have a little bit of what it might be like, a little mad scientist in my head, but I could not imagine having to work like that all the time.
Yeah. I think that,
but the money sounds cool. Hey,
right.
Tom's the richest guy in the world.
I'd be curious about this experiment, but I'm pretty much willing to bet I'd be right on this, is that if you took somebody who's really like in that jealousy mode and you found just the worst potential situation, like just the worst life that they can imagine, and then the best life that they can imagine of somebody who's like just take anybody to those extremes, to like the poorest with blind and you're disabled, every single bad thing you can imagine, and then take somebody with every single good thing you can imagine, right? And you ask them if they would like flip a coin and they would get one or the other, would they flip that coin? And I think most people, for the most part, would not flip that coin. They'd be like, I'm good. I'm good.
I'm happy to be where I'm at right now.
Yeah, you wouldn't take that risk to get that life. You'd start to see like, actually, there are things I like enough that I wouldn't want to take that risk.
It is interesting because as you started saying that, my mind jumped to what you might say, right? Which is really bad listening, but just for everybody, that's really bad listening skills. But it was like, I was like, I would love to be able to be each of those people for a day in their real life, because like, I think that you could make Elon's life look really good for you for a day or two. But if you got to walk a mile in his shoes for real, like on a real day, I don't know that I would, want that. Whereas I've heard so many people who have different disabilities and they have what appeared, like you said, like if I compared myself to you, like my life would suck. But those folks have such a better outlook on, they just have a different perspective. And I almost think that would be a cool experiment too, to be like, here, we're going to take you through a real life day in Elon's day and a real life day in the guy in the wheelchair.
You know what surprised me? You'd know a lot better this than I would, considering the patients you see. But the people that I've run into who've had some chronic illness, chronic pain, dealing with it for a really long time, I've been surprised to find how incredibly nice they are. Like, is that a trend that you see?
I I find that a lot of them are, and some of them are really nice until they're having a bad day, in which they're really mean.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't think they mean, it's almost like it's a reflection of your physiologic state, right? Because when we look at, I'm not sure if you're familiar with polyvagal theory and like the different parts of the nervous system, but we used to just say sympathetic is our fight or flight. Like I can beat up the saber-toothed tiger or I can run away, you know, and then parasympathetic is rest and rejuvenate and party with your friends because you're safe at the campfire. But the thing is, like, if you think about like a chipmunk outside and somebody's cat grabs it, it no longer can run away and it's stuck. So what's it do? It freezes and it kind of just like plays dead. And so what's interesting is, and so that frozen state really leads to a lot of issues in the chronically ill people. And so when they're really stressed and we see them pushed, I see people acting the way they don't want to. And a lot of times it's actually a physiological response to brain chemistry changes, infection driven. But otherwise, I mean, I think people, they have a different view. And as long as they're not going down the drain, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's like when they're not in the acute flare, in the acute downward spiral, they're just like so thankful.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the things, Robbie, that I talk about a lot, and I do, and I'm in the process of really developing more of the mindset of healing trainings, because I find that so many people are locked in to just this experience of focusing on what they don't want. And then you had talked earlier about, well, and as part of that, my segue into all of that is placebo. Because placebo is about a third of all of our outcomes. I'm like, why don't we harness it for our benefit? And, you know, thinking back, I think the first experience I did have was at a Mindshare collaborative event. I was trying to put the years together, but I'm pretty sure it was that with the Xpill. And that's like open label placebo. So the thing that I'd love for you to introduce it a little, then I have a question about it, because but I think I'll jump the gun if I don't let you explain to everybody what it is and the principle.
I think, everybody knows what placebos are. And when Tom says open placebo or ethical placebo, it's when somebody knows it's that. There's no deception like there often is with it. And, the maybe 1.5 minute backstory on it that I think is important, so you know where I'm coming from with it, as it's not really an opportunist perspective as much as it came from play, because I was inspired by the movie The Matrix, and there's that scene with the red pill, and I thought, why can't this be real? And I couldn't find any red pills, but I found red Tic Tacs. And the interesting thing about using a red Tic Tac to give somebody as a pill is you can't hide it. It tastes like cinnamon. It looks like a Tic Tac. Nobody thinks you're fooling. So it's not a real pill. But I put them in prescription pill bottles. I took them to Burning Man, and I told people that I had the red pill, and people loved it because it's all random make-believe, and they believed it. And we had these amazing conversations, and people would take it and have a realization about their truth. And other people said, get it away from me. I like my reality. And I thought it was a whole game until I got home, and a woman called me and said, do you have more of those pills in the bottles? And I said, yeah, why? And she said, because I'm a psychologist and I've been giving them to my patients and they're having huge breakthroughs. And I couldn't believe it jumped from this fake world to the real world. And then I found red vitamins, and eventually, rather than this matrix thing, I had people set intentions to it. And one by one, they would take it for it and things would happen. I got them in this Facebook group. They would take it for it every day. It would focus them. Eventually did coaching sessions with people to find out what they want. And then eventually, I made my own pills. I called up a supplement company and said, hey, can we make some pills with nothing in them? And they said, that's a placebo. I said, yeah, exactly. And they said, that's illegal. And I had a feeling they'd say that because I couldn't find anywhere to buy placebos at the time. They said, it's illegal. You cannot produce a placebo. It is illegal. And I said, yeah, but let's put the ingredients, like it's inactive ingredients. It's rice powder. And let's make no claims. Like this cures this. No claims.
There's nothing in here. Yeah.
Nothing in here. Right. And they said, nobody's done that before. And so they made them, and we made these things, and I didn't know what to call it. And I literally took the pill with the intention to know the name, and a name came clear called the Xpill. And I thought it makes perfect sense because you fill in the blank for X for what you want it to mean. And then I started meeting with people individually all the time, and I'd put this pill in front of them and I'd say, what is it that you want? And a few things happened. Was one, just how unclear people are what they actually want. A lot of the conversations first were like going through how much conflict people have about what they want. I want this, but that means this. And there's a lot of, when you're clear on what you want, I think you get it pretty quickly. But when you're not, there's a lot of debate that goes on. But once it does, it used to go from these hour-and-a-half long conversations to what you experienced as the Xpill activation, a 10-minute process that dials in the mind, the body, the vision, the energy, everything into one to do it. And then the big realization, and then we can get into the conversation that I found with it is while people would really get a lot of what they want, it's not so much a get what you want pill as much as it's a truth pill. So I found that sometimes people would take it for something and get the quote unquote opposite effect, because I found that if you're in alignment with it, you get what you want. If you're not, suddenly things become clear as to why you're so out of alignment with it. And I can certainly go into a lot of stories, but that's just the general explanation of it.
Well, the crazy thing is, like, this is exactly what I see when I do like healing mindset work with Lyme, is people aren't clear with what they want. They're like, I don't want to have Lyme. Like, that's not what you want. That's a lot of what you might not want, but it's like, and we don't process the not, but also I find that like a lot of people, I mean, it's almost like Marianne Williamson's quote about like, we're not really afraid of our darkness. It's our light that scares us the most. I know I'm butchering that, but obviously you've heard it, but it's like, when you ask them what they really want, they're not clear. And it's like, when they're not clear, it's just something that like, it's really hard to go. And the thing that stumbled me for a second is I was in a coaching class with Bob Proctor, right? And they were like, oh, we've been doing it for 3 of the 6 months. And they're like, write out your we're going to revise in the next like 10 minutes, our positive self-image statement. And I'm like, freaking, yeah. Like, it was just all of a sudden, every negative thing I ever thought about myself came up. And I was like, I can't do this. And so what was really interesting was I had done some marketing work with Sam Horn, and she goes, hey, do this. Put a vertical line on a page, and on the left, write down all the things you're thinking about. And on the right, let's juxtapose some things. So I said, I'm going to put a line on the page, and on the left, I'm going to write down all the negative stuff. Like you said in the beginning of the with the team obstacle work, is get all the negatives out. And then I wrote the exact opposite of it on the piece of paper. I tore the paper. I actually have a video that I teach with that I burnt it ceremoniously. And then I had what I really wanted. But I think you really hit on one of the hardest things for people is we're so focused on what we don't want. And then we're like, well, we never get what we want, but we're focusing on what we don't want.
Yeah.
So in all this is, it dovetails so much. One of the things that I think is so impressive about, because I've gone through the Xpill activation, the experience is like, if you want to do it, you're open to do it. And then you go through the process, you set your intention and you get it. And it is amazing over the course of the next couple of days to hear. I mean, there are people who will take this rice pill that like, it's totally nothing in there. They have no rice issues. They're in the bathroom vomiting and having diarrhea. Other people are having euphoric events. Other people like the answer to the question that they've been working on for years comes to them. Other people are healing. And it's so the part that I led with the open label placebo is the power of this is you're telling them that it's placebo and that this is just a symbol for your mind. I mean, like, how's that work?
Yeah, the way it works, I believe, is that what we're really messing with here is the unconscious mind. And the unconscious, the subconscious, works in symbols, right? The same way you have a dream. You don't dream a speech somebody gives you. You don't dream a letter. You dream in symbols. You dream about a bear or something, right? And that bear is an archetype. And there's many, many kinds of archetypes that are of all kinds, and dream dictionaries can be great with this. But that bear might mean your father. And that bear to me might be anger, right? So we both know it's a bear, but it has different meanings. That's what an archetype is. Mm-hmm. And so the Xpill idea is about communicating back to the unconscious mind with an archetype. And especially in Western culture, the pill archetype means what? It means change. Like when you take a pill, when you want to change something, but it also, yeah, it's a symbol. It's this archetypical symbol that's different meaning to you. Your change you want is different, but we both agree it's a pill. And so The unconscious mind and the conscious mind both agree. And it's also a symbol of commitment, because once you take it, you're on the ride and you can't turn back. So that's why a lot of people, even though there's nothing in it, they won't take it, right? Because they'll be like, they'll know that it's real on some level, right? And so it's a symbol of change and commitment that you are sending to the unconscious mind. And both the conscious mind gets it. The conscious mind essentially runs a program of those words through this unconscious symbol to the unconscious mind. And that way, the unconscious mind says, oh, you're really serious? Okay, then let's do that. Or says, oh, you're really serious? Well, guess what? We've got a problem, because this is keeping us from getting that. And that's where the quote unquote kind of negative reactions can happen sometimes, where you're just like, oh, crap, I'm out of alignment if I really want this.
It's so true, because it's like, and I find that in my work, I hear words coming out of people's mouths and I see action being different. So we totally know they're out of alignment. So it's so funny though, because it's just like this little purple pill in the little glass vial with the little stopper. But it's such a power. Symbols are really powerful.
It's so powerful. And I think it especially works to your work too. And I'm happy to send you more to experiment with it, because what I was called into a pain clinic that deals with autoimmune, deals with Lyme and everything like that. And the doctor said to me, he said, I know how to cure people, but I don't quite know how to shift their identity from being somebody who's sick all the time to somebody who's not sick, right? And so I met with his patients who were cured, quote unquote, but they hadn't moved on mentally from the disease.
Yeah, all the time, brother. All the time.
And so to do that activation with them, like one person who wanted a job, and this is what oftentimes happens with the Xpill process too, is they'll say something to the end like, I want to be open to preparing to get a job, right? And I'll say, okay, you can have that, but notice you're 3 steps away from what you want. You're not quite open. You're not quite prepared. You don't quite have a job, right? The thing about the Xpill is you can go straight to what you want. So if you want that, that's great. But if you just want a job, we can go straight to the job. You don't have to be open. You don't even have to be prepared. Like if you're willing, if that's what you really want, let's do that. And they take that and strange things happen. Like they'll be like, suddenly, wait, I got this opportunity for this offer where I get to learn on the job. Great. So now you got the job and you get the prepping from getting the job rather than preparing to get a job, right?
Right.
So it's about going straight to what you want.
It's so cool, because it's so much of what I'm teaching is like, really, you have to ask for what you want. Because what I've realized is like in my practice, like I'm like, oh, I want this, but it's kind of like a wishy-washy. And so I get that. I get exactly what I've defined, and I get a whole bunch of what I didn't define because I was wishy-washy.
Yes. It's about that getting clear, right? And it's also what I love, it's taken me 6 years to develop this process. And part of the process, what I do is I make sure people get to choose for themselves. So I rarely ever even make a suggestion, because I don't want the credit or the blame. I want them to figure out what they want, and then if things go off the rails or whatever, they take responsibility. But if things go well, they also take the credit. It's not giving it for me. And that's what full responsibility means for me. And that's why through the process, I tell them, like, you don't have to take this. You don't have to take it now. You don't have to take it never. Like, I respect their choice, even if their choice is to continue to suffer. I'm not going to be like, you got to take this pill. It'll change everything. Like, no, that's not respecting choice. I don't want to manipulate anybody. I don't want to convince anybody. All I'm simply doing is giving an invitation and opportunity. And if somebody doesn't take that, I think that's actually empowering too. If I give somebody the decision, somebody take the Xpill recently. This is so funny. Somebody took the Xpill recently and it had this whole life turnaround. She was throwing up every day and now she's no longer throwing up. She got this new job she wanted. And the thing is, she met a guy she really liked. And what happened after that is, guess what? The guy who she had the crush on for 10 years, who was on and off, suddenly comes back and says, you know what? I'm ready. Let's do this. And she goes, no. I don't want that. I'm now with this new guy, right? But I think that there's something so powerful to even that, to saying, like, to having that choice. And that's why I think that it's really about that choice and honoring that choice. And if somebody might go through the Xpill process and just say, you know what, I'm realizing I don't want this. And that's great, because now you've decided, and that's what it's there to help with.
This is so empowering and so important, because making a decision. And I think what's so brilliant about what you just said is you're like, here's the pill, yes or no. Because even if you choose the blue pill instead of the red pill, you've made a choice, which previous to that you hadn't been. And it really is empowering. And I think that's why so many of us get and don't get what we want is when you actually stand up and make that decision. And I think it's really interesting that the guy came back, because I'm thinking back, like when you leave, one of my goals is to always leave people with the impression of increase, right? That I want to be giving more in the world. I want to be, I want to be growing, and I want to be inspiring other people to grow. Mm-hmm. And when we work together, I want them to feel empowered to care for themselves, because after all, it's your insurance, it's your health, it's your life. I'm here as a guide, not as the doer of all the work. And I love empowering them. But it's like that, like when she goes and she made a decision to put herself first with that purple pill, all of a sudden everybody around her is like, oh, she's different now. Oh, I want more of that. Right. And it's like, that's really cool, bro.
Totally.
I love it. Yeah. So, I mean, if folks are interested in learning more about like the Xpill experience, I mean, anything you do, but especially the Xpill process, because I think for my tribe, so much of it is about declaring to the universe, standing and declaring to yourself that yes or no, I want this thing in front of me. I mean, how can they learn more about that?
Yeah, we're revamping the site right now, but if anybody wants to email Robbie, ROBBE @xpill.com. Or there's also my site, robertrichman.com. It's really hit me that it's an experience. And so I'd want to see what's right for that person, how it can be applied. And that, I'm also looking for partners like you to experiment with this, right? Because my goal for this isn't my moneymaker. And in a lot of ways, talking about passion, it's been a passion project. I've devoted a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy to it. Certainly haven't made the money back. But I really, I'm working on a new way to create this, to crowdsource this and have it be like, because I don't want to make any claims with the pill itself. But like, for example, if you develop, I show you, this is the activation process, and you say that you've got a cure for X, it's like that division of church and state, I think, empowers it, right? Because as the pill creator, I can't make any claims, but you can make claims through your process, and the pill is just a part of that. So you're also not claiming the pill does it, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
I think that we can cure and help a lot of different things by separating that, where I'm simply creating the protocols and the process, and other people like you apply it to disease-specific type of things. Yes. And that way there's not a big legal issue with it. So I'm hoping to find other partners such as yourself who are willing to experiment and say, okay, Robbie, teach me how to do the activation. I want to do it on this group of people, or this people are suffering from this, or this people I want to empower, et cetera. And then we've got like this open source network of people using these techniques, even beyond the Xpill itself. Some people have done it without the Xpill, but use the protocols too. So that's my goal, is to whether almost make it more like a Wikipedia approach rather than a company approach to this.
Yeah, I love it, because I was going to say, like, either on the air or off there, I definitely want to do more of this, because to me, it does two things that they're like, because this is a process I work with a lot, but I want to make it simpler. And I want to, and I think you've really boiled it down to simplicity, and there's a symbolic action that's very activating. And, and so I have in our practice, there's a very clear blueprint of how to do some testing. And the great thing is we can collect data on it, because I'm not going to make claims. I'm going to say, hey, if you want to harness the power of the placebo as simply and quickly, as easily as possible, we've got a process, and I also have a lot of, in our online tribe, I mean, there's so many people suffering who have been to all the doctors, and I can guarantee you a large number of folks, part or all of their remaining illness is still that they're just in the wrong mindset. And sometimes, I'll be honest, I mean, the part that's really intriguing is it's so easy. Like my process is kind of hard. Like I'm like, all right, like find your goals, work through it, get out, throw away the negative, and it's like, it's all part of the same process and it can reinforce things, but man, what a simple approach. So we should definitely talk about this.
Yeah. And it's a both and, because, some people are just so clear. They don't even ask me what's in it. And they're just like, give me this, I'm taking it. It works. Right. And other people are just have absolutely no idea what they want and aren't clear. And that's why I think it's a both and, for some people, it is going to be that simple. Other people, you can hand that to them and they're going to freak out and they're going to need that process that you did just to be clear enough to use it. Right. So it's totally a both and.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting too, because I'm thinking of, boy, I can give it to a few people if I want to have negative results. I know exactly who to give it to, right? And I mean that like with love, because I think when we approach this, we want to share with people the tool at the right time so that they're successful.
Right. Yeah, I'm excited to see that as part of your process. And I got to say, it's so funny. I know you from Mindshare, and I really have just known you as this great guy. But through the person I referred, I won't say her name for privacy, but through the person I referred, she's been through seen so many doctors, has such a high BS detector. And she is like, Tom is the best. Like he knows it better than anybody. And that's beyond knowledge, like your level of communication, your level of care. And I've known her for a while, and I've seen her go through some pretty bad experiences and pretty bad practitioners and things like that. And to see how lit up she is as somebody who just knows this space so well and knows doctors so well and knows bullshit and knows what's real and whatnot, and to see how much confidence that she has in your work and how complimentary she's been, I personally was blown away, because I'm like, I just know Tom is a great guy. That's all I know, because I don't know you in a medical context at all. And it was just so cool to hear all that back and be like, oh, wow, he's not just a great guy. Like he's really good at what he does.
Oh, thank you. It's awesome. It just lights me up working with her and people like her who are truly want to heal. And I'm sure you're like me, you really value referrals, right? When I refer someone to somebody else, I want it to go really well. So I appreciate, hearing the positive feedback and sort of, and how much, you feel about me so that you could, even make the referral. But yeah, I think we're just, as everybody can tell from our conversation, I am very passionate. And when you hear about my healing story, which so many people who are listening have, it's like, I was following my passion, and I was not directly in this path. I always wanted to do the service. I wanted to do it in a different way. But then there's this need and this passion and the science and the service. And, I did see that gap, where we have to bring together the whole picture, and bring it all into one place so that we can offer people, it's funny. I had a conversation with a friend years ago. It was kind of more like an argument for a while. We got, a couple of chiropractors who live local. We get together every once in a while and shoot the breeze. And then we have professional discussions over beer, and it was like, we came up with this. Sometimes it's not just about knowing what to do, but it's knowing what order to do it in. And it really, I've learned a lot more about that recently, where it's just, one of my friends told me, because as we get so many opportunities, so many opportunities are presented to us. The universe is so abundant. But he said to me, he goes, Tom, not every opportunity is your opportunity. And I was just like, wow. And if I can share some of that knowledge with our patients and with the people I work with, I think it's, and I feel you do the same thing.
Yeah. And I'm glad that, we met through Mindshare, and I'm glad that somebody like you is a part of that, because what I've seen, I'm sure you've probably seen this for yourself and others, where a practitioner is really good. They don't know how to scale. They get burnt out. Everybody loses, right? And I think what Mindshare has been great for is saying, like, how do we scale you? How do you help most people, but still get rewarded and create those systems and balance and everything like that? And it just thrills me, because I think that it's, as practitioners, as great as you are, and I'm sure you are figuring this out, how to help more people, how to grow, et cetera. And I know that Mindshare has helped both of us to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I love it. They're so great. And the other, one of the, to kind of finish on the mind share piece, one of the things I was taught was like, don't like, cause one of my passions is to teach other doctors how to do what I do in their own unique way.
Yeah.
And they're like, before you do that, fix all the problems that you have in your practice. And I was like, oh man, Carl really hit me with one right below the belt.
Do you think, does it go deeper than that? Because one of the things I realized with culture work is like this woman came up to me in my culture work and she said, I want my culture to be more exciting. Like I want a really exciting culture. I said, great, we could do that. And I said, just tell me one thing first. How exciting is your personal life? And she goes, like not at all. And I said, okay, so you know what that means is you're using your culture as medication for your life. And I said, you're going to be extracting value from your people in your company. I said, first, we're going to work on your personal levels of excitement in your life. Because when we do that, you're going to bring excitement to your culture and your culture is going to get exciting. Yeah. So I wonder if that's true for practitioners because it's your practice, but it's also, okay, how good and healthy and happy are you as a practitioner before you're giving that to other people?
It's so interesting that you bring that up because it's so the thing. And like my practice has been consistently good, but it's taken off after I made one change. And now I'm about to launch my practitioner program. And the number one thing I'm going to teach is what you just said, because what I did was I would say that I work on work-life balance. I have a good family balance. I put my family first. And what I said was I said that all the time. And then I would come home and I would like spend these targeted periods of time where I'm like, oh, well, my daughter has a ballet recital or a ski competition. I'm not going to miss it. Well, I'm like, well, what about all the other times where it's not on the calendar that I missed or that she said something and I blew her off and it was, and then I'm like, if I'm willing to do that to a 9, 10, 11-year-old on a, semi-regular basis, oh, I'm working hard, but I'm in the other room. So we're together. Like, what am I doing to myself? And so I showed up for myself because I realized that I can't show up for Talia or for Jill unless I show up for me. When I showed up for myself, I showed up for Jill and I showed up for Talia. And there was actually some revising of our family dynamic when Tom actually showed up. And it wasn't like I was ever absent, but I just showed up more. And so then what I do is bring into the practice, I try to bring that in with our team. And then with my practitioners, I'm like, I'm not going to teach you how to be really so damn good at this that you never have you have tons of money, tons of patients who are great, and you never get to spend time with your family or do what you love.
Was that a hard jump at first? Because I would assume that there's almost this mentality of if I do that, I'm not going to get enough work done. I'm not going to do all this stuff I need to do. And there's going to be a sacrifice there. And my work and my practice is going to suffer because I'm actually more present with my family. Like, was there a mental leap there? Was that hard to do?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm still every day. I'm just like, I have 27 things to do, but it's a matter of prioritizing what my life is. But what I will say is, and I'd love to hear your experience with this because, is when the thing was when I said yes to my family, I was just kind of still saying no to me. The hardest part is saying yes to yourself because the truth is so many of my patients, so many of my parents, they're like, oh, my kid is so sick. Everything's about them. When they're better, I'll work on me. It's just like the investment in Bitcoin. Well, when I know more, I'll do it. Or when I know how to do the job, I'll apply for the job. Like, it's just fucking do it. Just make a decision of what you want and do it. And I was like, I am so sick and tired of treating Tom like shit. And I'm sick and tired of treating Jill like shit. And, and I didn't do it a lot. It would happen once in a blue moon, but I respect that woman so much and love her so much. I don't want to ever treat her that way. And so really what it was I'm like, if I'm treating that person who I spend my whole life with, I mean, we've been married 20 years now. I mean, what am I doing to myself? And so I reverse engineer. I just went right. I took the pill basically. And I said, Tom is number one. And as soon as I truly did that, then everything else goes. And it's like,
wow.
But talk about cutting through the bullshit. I mean, if you want to, it's kind of like, what is that, Habari or whatever the hell that, the thing where you stab yourself with Harry. I'm like, it's kind of doing that. Like, let's just cut through the veil. And
wow. So was there something like, was it just a mindset, or was it something practical? What if Tom's number one, it's like, okay, I really want to go skiing in the morning. I do that. Like, was there something tactical that you did to make Tom number one, or was it just a mindset?
I think it was a mindset, Robbie. I mean, it was like, well, I just kept saying it over and over. And then what we did, well, then we took action on it though. I think it was a mindset decision. Then we took action, right? So we went to, we decided to go out to Utah, and every day I would work early. I would work East Coast. And then in the West Coast or Mountain Time, I would go skiing in the afternoon. And it was like, and then I started doing, then because I took action, I made a decision in my mind, and then I made a physical decision. So now it's not just in my mind, I've now created on the physical plane. Then I started putting it into action, and then it was easier to do the next time and the next time. And I found in the beginning, like, cause I just felt like I was draining myself.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you see this with all your execs and even people all throughout a company. We're so driven by that passion that we're not refilling our passion for ourselves so that we have the energy to put into that. So I'm not telling people, like you said, you're not telling them what to think or what to ask for, but we ask for them in this line, right? We go, hey guys, like, I'm making, you can use this personal power, this passion, this energy you have any way you want. But it's not an endless fountain of energy.
Yeah. What comes to mind when you say it is like, it is, for me, at least, it's crossing a friction point. So if, for me, it's getting in the water in the beach. It's just so huge and refreshing. But the friction point is I got to load up my car. I got to get to the beach. I got to park. I got to do all that. Once I get through the friction points, I'm good. And so I've realized, like, okay, how, in some ways I can hack that. Like when I make plans to do that with a friend, it's so much easier than getting myself to do that. Right. And so that's what's coming up for me as I'm thinking my own life. Okay, how can I do more of that? Okay, I've got to take into consideration, there are the friction points. How can I do less of that to get to that point?
Yeah. And I think it's like picking that little spot, the thing that you really like, it's what would you really want to do? And then, like you were saying with getting in, getting out of your comfort zone, it's like, just get a little uncomfortable. And that's really like, I had a thought and that was super uncomfortable. I mean, that was actually almost dangerous. It was so like, if I just dropped everything, because like you say, like if I drop everything, I could lose everything. But what I'm going to say is, what is like treating Tom like number one this much feel like?
Yeah.
So I love the way you put that, because it's because I think in mindset, like so much of it is, so many people are telling us and teaching us to think it. And then they leave the action part out, or the action is like a 50-page journal, whereas like,
Yep.
Exactly. So I have a question for you, because this is amazing. Like this is like in one of my courses, like, have you noticed this? Like I give them 1 to 2 pages of like, and it's like, you could only put 10 lines on each page. So it's like, boom, boom, action. And I'll ask them what they want, what they're looking forward to, where a challenge is. And then I'm just like, asking them about what they're afraid of. Like, are they afraid of getting better? And like, whenever I ask anybody to look at what they're afraid of, it's like crickets. I don't know if you've had this experience, but.
Yeah, I mean, it just gets super vulnerable there. And I think that in some ways it's the language, because we don't quite go to what we're afraid of. And I think it's more like, it's a way it's hacking the question. So rather than saying, what are you afraid of? It's more like, if you do this or this, what do you think might happen that you wouldn't like? Like, you start to put people's goals through that, and you say, well, this might happen. Right. And then you didn't use the word afraid, but you're like, you're imagining them to go through it. And what part of that experience might you not like, or what's a consequence of doing that and so it might be just hacking the wording, because a fear can be a trigger word. It can be too emotional. It can short circuit people, or they don't want to admit it in front of some people that they're afraid of something. Right.
Right. Well, it's interesting, because from an energetic perspective, even though we were all on Zoom and all they had to do is write it down on their own piece of paper and not even tell anybody, dude, did we hit on something that put people in like frozen? They were like instantaneously, the word triggered. So that's a really Interesting. So I think for a lot of folks listening too, when you're dealing with your chronic illness or your kids or your spouse who have chronic illnesses, is a lot of it is kind of that wordsmithing thing. And I think that there's a lot of go grab and check out the culture blueprint, because it's really interesting, because it's about developing culture in businesses, but I find I apply a lot of the concepts to myself because I'm a scientist and I want to boil it down, and I pride myself on being able to communicate well, but a lot of it is I overcomplicate it, or in some cases I try to oversimplify it by like, what are you afraid of?
Yeah, thank you for saying it. It's funny because when I wrote the book, I kind of considered it a failure just in the sense of I thought about it like a stereo guide for your company. Oh, something's going wrong, opening up to this page, you'll fix it, right? But it surprised me how many people not only read the whole thing, but people would say, wait a minute, this applies to my family because my family's a culture. Or one executive left it on his dining room table and his 16-year-old kid read half the book in a sitting. Because I realized like culture is beyond company. Anytime there's more than two people there's culture. So it really, a lot of people have said that it applies to family dynamics and just getting what you want in general.
Yeah. And I would also challenge you to not only get the book and read it, but to the stuff that you find in the book and that we've talked about today, apply it to yourself. Because I find that so much of what we have in these manuals and these amazing books out are kind of, we put out and we project for working in a group or other people. I'm like, it's just like, how to keep like when you look in your book, there's like in the beginning, it's talking about some of the key points, like how to keep morale high, how to innovate in a way that's inexpensive and easy for everyone. Like, and then like how to create a place where everyone feels ownership in a company, or where, what's the other? Oh yeah. How to have fun, get work done while having a great time. Those are things that I think are equally applicable, the concepts that you teach, Robbie, to an organization as it is to a family, as it is to a relationship, especially with yourself. And I just through my journey learned that. So I really urge people to, look at the culture inside your head. What is that movie? Inside Out or whatever. Did you see that?
Yeah.
You have a culture inside. It's not
totally. Good point.
So that's awesome. Thank you so much for spending the time to do this. I mean, this is just spectacular. I know we're going to help so many people.
Really, really fun. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you again? And everybody, we'll put this in the show notes, clickable links and all that stuff. But why don't you let people know how they can connect and the experiences they can have?
Yeah, pretty much everything's at robertrichman.com, RICHMAN. So ROBERT, That's everything from a corporate level. I do a lot for companies with speeches with culture experiences on every type of level, leadership facilitation, coaching, et cetera. And then there's some stuff on Xpill there on Xpill.com. But seriously, and I don't say this on every podcast, but I really am intrigued by your audience. But my direct communication is Robbie, ROBBE at Xpill.com. Send me a note, whether it be a question or you're curious about the Xpill experience for yourself or your practice or group, and we can talk about it.
Yeah. And definitely I will be chatting with you about bringing the Xpill into the different things that I do. I think it dovetails so well. And I love just that everything that I hear from, it's like, and we didn't talk a lot about open space. Maybe we can do it again and talk about that. There's certainly information on your website about it. But I think the thing everybody to take away from this is, Robbie's like a real guy who walks the planet like the rest of us, but he empowers us to do the best we can where we're at and really grow into where we want to be. And to, I don't know, it's just like, I just feel so empowered every time I listen to you. It's like, let's cut through the BS and let's just understand that we can, work doesn't have to be a grind. Life doesn't need to be a grind. So I'm just eternally grateful for the fact that we can laugh together, talk about some serious stuff together, and that we can share resources like the Culture Blueprint and the Xpill with so many people.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure, Tom. Thank you.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. Again, this is Robert Richman. Check him out, robertrichman.com. We've got all his links in the show notes, and thanks for joining us. Until next time, live a full cup life.
Thanks for listening. Don't miss out on a single thing. Subscribe to our podcast and then join me at tommoorcroft.com.